All right, we're at our, I call this our cell building yard. I think you can probably tell which colonies are the cell builders. They were just set up yesterday. We have 7 cell builders set up today, and we're going to graft into them. Every week we change the cell builders we're using. They go on a cycle of about 3 weeks, so next week we'll use another 7 and give these a rest and so on and so forth. Anyway, these were set up yesterday. We're going to graft into them today, and we're going to do a grand experiment that I agreed I would do back in January when I was at the Hive Life Conference there in Tennessee. Kent Williams was talking about putting 2-day-old queen cells into nucs, and he said it works pretty good, and the nucs finish them off, and he was quite happy with the results. I also remember, I believe it was Larry Connor that wrote an article on doing the same thing many years ago. I think he wrote the article into Bee Culture magazine, and at that time I kind of just poo-pooed it and thought it sounded like a bad idea, but after listening to Kent talk about it, I thought I'd give it a shot. We're going to graft 45 cells into each cell builder, and we're going to have some nucs that will have been queenless overnight that we're going to put the 2-day cells into on Thursday. Today is Tuesday. Our grafting schedule is usually we graft on Tuesdays, and that would normally give us ripe cells to put into nucs the next week on a Friday. But again, this week we're just going to wait 2 days, and we're going to take them out, probably put the rails with the queen cells and all, bees and all, right into a nuc box and carry them in a nuc box. And we'll take them right out to the nucs that have been queenless overnight, and we're just going to see what happens. I'm very curious about this, because if these nucs do a real good job of building these cells, this could be a total game changer for us. We wouldn't have to wait a week and a half to get our cells into a queenless colony. It'll be very interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing the results on this. Grafting today, 2 days we'll come back and get the cells, put them out, and we'll check them periodically to see how they look. And then all of these nucs that these cells are going into are actually going to become overwintering colonies for me, overwintering nucs or single stories, so I'll be able to watch this process all the way up into next year. It makes sense the more I think about it, so I don't see why these queenless nucs won't take a 2-day-old cell and finish it off. They'd be wanting to build their own cells anyway, so why wouldn't they? Okay, I'm not going to get into too much detail about how we do this. I've got a video out on how we build queen cells and make queens, and I'll put a link to that at the end of this video. I'll just briefly show you how we set up these cell builders and put the cells in. This was a queen right double deep colony, and we put the queen up on the top over a double screen board and took about half the bees off the frames that she's with into the bottom box. Kind of reversed the what was the upper box to the bottom, and as you can see, there's a bunch of bees in there. This overcrowded condition is really important for good cell building, in my opinion. You get the very best cells when you have an overcrowded condition. So the queen's in that box, and we have a double screen board with the entrance to the back, so all the field force is coming back to the bottom, the queenless part. And as you can see, this thing is just jammed full of bees, and that's what you want when you're going to make good cells. We always put the frame of grafted cells 2 frames over from the feeder. When we made this queenless yesterday, we just gave them a frame of open brood here so they have something to feed and work on until today when we give them the grafted cells. And it's just exactly what we'd expect. They've already started some little queen cells, so we need to get rid of all that business. And I'll go get the next crate. And this frame will go in with the queen. Okay, so here's our grafted cells, 45 to a frame. I'm going to top this feeder off. We filled it yesterday, but I would expect about half of it to be gone today. And I think it's important to be feeding thin sucrose syrup when they're building cells. I always get better results when I'm feeding the bees at the same time that we're building cells. Each of these 7 colonies we're working with today have 45 cells grafted into them. I want to get a little bit of an idea of what our success rate is. Yeah, that one's a dud. Looks pretty good. So I'm just going to put the frame, bees and all, right on the cells in this nuc that we're going to transport these cells in. We need about 5 of these frames today for the nucs we're working with. That was a good take. I'm just going to surround these by another 2 frames with bees and honey. That's how we're going to transport them.
You gotta get it.
So there's 175 cells in there, and we're just going to transport them in this nuc box. Got the entrance screened. We're at our, we call it the Walmart yard in Clayton. We're right across the street from Home Depot and Walmart in Clayton, Georgia. Let's just take 1 bar out at a time and do this. And you can just put that frame back in there till we're finished with this bar. We're just going to put the cells right on the perimeter of the existing brood. They've got a lot of royal jelly in them already. I know that the first 48 hours is when the majority of the royal jelly is fed to these queen cells. It'll be very interesting to see how the royal jelly quantity looks later when we check them next week. Now we're going to try some of these by just putting the cell in between the top bars. I'm not sure how that's going to work. I think we'll kind of leave it a little loose. We'll do several like that and see how that turns out. Anytime we make cells, we always feed thin sucrose syrup unless there's a nectar flow. Seems like the prudent thing to do in this case too. Seth is putting two 2-penny nail holes in the top of each lid. We're using 5-pound honey jars to feed these nucs. That side, we had harvested the queens the day before. we put the cells in. This side, we harvested the queen and immediately put the cells in. We're back today just to look at the cells, see what they did with it, how good they did at cell building, and also the ones that had been queenless for a day. I want to see, I want to compare the cells that they built from scratch, which I'm sure they had started some, to the ones that we put in. So Jesse's about to open the first one. Let's go over here. What we got, Jesse? So most of the nukes in this yard are like this. They're a frame and a half a brood. I'd probably call that 3 frames of bees, maybe 3.5 frames of bees.
It's just the foundation there. Frame of food.
This yard is just set up as queen mating nukes. Okay. So that's the cell we put in. It's still got a lot of royal jelly up there. I don't see a royal jelly problem at all. Okay, did they build any of their own cells? They should have.
Yeah.
That's something they built right there.
Yep. There's a couple more up there.
Okay.
And things can hide real good.
Okay. Not about half full of royal jelly. Okay, so this nuke is smaller. Some of these are smaller in this yard. I want to compare the small ones and see what they did with the cells. I don't think this is ideal, putting that cell in such a small colony. But the cell, isn't that interesting? They put another cell of their own right next to it. So we want to get rid of those. That doesn't look too bad.
No, still got a lot of royal jelly.
A lot of royal jelly, yeah. Small side. That's a real small nuke though too.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the cell we put in. Got a little skinned up coming out, but it's still full of royal jelly, so they built a decent cell. Go ahead and kill all the rogue cells, the cells that they started.
Okay.
John found this cell. A beginning beekeeper might think this is a real nice cell because it's so long, but what this is telling me is that the queen larva fell off the royal jelly and the cell just became elongated. This is not a good cell. I'm going to open it up just for the fun of it.
Yep.
And see, she's fallen off. She's down in the bottom there. This would never be a good situation. So I think I can see a little bit about what's going on here. The best cells in this yard are built by the colonies that are at least 2 frames of brood, 3 to 4 frames of bees. These real small ones that are just 1 frame of brood and 2 or 3 frames of bees have built cells out okay, but they don't look as nice and robust as the ones that were built by the nukes that had at least 2 frames of brood. Jesse's about to get to the ones that where we put the queen cell in between the top bars. I want to see how that turned out too. Well, they definitely built it out. I can see that. I'm a little worried about tearing the cell as we take it apart, but I do want to see what's going on in here. Yeah. You can see royal jelly in there still. It's not a bad looking cell. I ripped it a little though, taking it apart. No, I didn't. Faked me out. Okay, nothing wrong with that. I'll check a couple others. That's a little bigger nuke, see, so I think that's why they did a little better job. nukes where we put the small queen cell in a nuke where we had just harvested the queen, like literally 20 minutes later.
There it is.
They did.
Yep.
Okay. Looks okay. It's full of look. Look at all that royal
Yeah,
jelly.
man, it's filled
It's
up.
not a bad looking cell. I think if I was going to make a practice of introducing these young cells to anything, I would do it immediately after collecting the queen. All of these have built cells and they're fairly decent. The bigger ones actually built pretty good cells. I don't think I would take the queen out and put the cell in the next day, because you have to go back through all the nukes or colonies, whatever you're using, and do away with the cells that they built themselves. Now, on this side where we put the cell in immediately after harvesting the queen, they have built some cells, but they're all younger than ours, so ours will be the first cell that hatches. So if you are going to do this, I think it's okay to put the cell in right after harvesting the queen or making your split. We set up a couple of yards with those 48-hour-old queen cells. This is another one in northeast Georgia. The timing is such that they should be just starting to lay right now, so we're going to check on the shape of some of these queens. This is random. I have not checked this nuke yet. And if she's in here, we should just be starting to see eggs. And there's a few eggs on this frame. There she is. This is the queen that was raised from one of those 48-hour-old. And we've looked at several. Jesse and I have already looked at about 20. They all look really good. I see no problem with at least the physical appearance of these queens. So my take so far on this situation is that the larger nukes that have 2 frames of brood or more, that are fairly robust nukes, are doing a pretty good job of making cells. The ones that are smaller, 1 frame of brood, 1.5 frame of brood, they're building cells, and I mean, they look okay, but they're not as good as the ones that have more brood, more bees in them, basically. I still haven't really figured out if there's some real advantage to this over just letting the cell builders finish the cells and put a ripe cell in. At least for queen mating nukes, I think that's probably the way to go. If you're making larger units, larger splits that have several frames of brood and bees, you know, these cells might be the way to go, but for queen mating nukes, I don't think so. I don't think they're building good enough cells, not for me anyway.